As everyone from the investigation team got out of their van, they couldn't help but continue to stare at the appearance of the shelter curiously and be amazed by its grandeur. Upon entering the shelter, Zhang Yi welcomed and invited them to sit anywhere inside with a smile. A message was sent to the shelter ahead in time, informing Zhou Qi and the others about their guests from the Jiangnan district. But out of curiosity, Zhou Qi, who waited patiently at the shelter's entrance, quickly looked at the people Zhang Yi brought with him with a warm greeting. However, seeing their invited guests, Zhou Qi leaned close to Zhang Yi's ear and whispered, "Zhang Yi, are they the people sent by the Jiangnan district? They really look like regular troops." Zhang Yi would not easily bring people to the shelter. Even if these people came from the Jiangnan district, Zhang Yi would not allow them to enter his restricted area without a certain identity and status. Hearing Zhou Qi's question, Zhang Yi replied, "They are all envoys from the Jiangnan district, coming to help Tianhai City deal with the zombie problem, so go get some food and drinks ready." The team quietly made their way to the lounging room and sat down on the sofa. Apart from their captain, it seems the team didn't want to act or look like bumpkins entering a city for the first time, so they could only quietly look at everything in the house. Luxurious furniture, reliable electricity, warm and comfortable environment. All these things were something they couldn't enjoy from their blizzard city in Jiangnan region. After speaking, Zhang Yi turned his head and looked at Bian Junwu and the others. "By the way, I wonder what you guys would like to drink. Our family conditions are relatively simple, and we only have some wine, coffee, and drinks, so I hope you don't mind." Hearing Zhang Yi's words, even Bian Junwu's eyelids jumped under his dark sunglasses, and the others had the same dumbfounded expressions written on their faces as well, especially Wu Di, who wondered if he'd heard wrong. His entire demeanor was as if to ask Zhang Yi if what he mentioned were only just simple. In these icy apocalypse, having just that simple resources would be considered to be something the most powerful and wealthiest people would have. However, being professional soldiers, they were also not too surprised by the comfortable environment in the villa. "Boiled water is fine." Bian Junwu spoke up politely after a brief silence. Then, he suddenly said to Zhang Yi, "Can we talk alone?" Zhang Yi nodded and smiled. "Of course, please follow me." It was obvious to Zhang Yi that Bian Junwu probably had a motive, and Zhang Yi would only try his best to meet it if it would immensely benefit him, of course. So Bian Junwu gave the order to his team to remain where they were, while he followed Zhang Yi to the small reception room next door. This room was located in the southeast corner of the shelter, with a wide field of view and walls made of thick bulletproof glasses. It was easy to talk here to make people feel comfortable, and it was a very suitable place for friends to drink tea and chat. Zhang Yi placed 2 glasses of boiled water, one on the opposite side and the other in front of him. Bian Junwu came to the reception room, put his hands behind his back and briefly looked at the snowy scene outside, and then sat down on the office chair opposite to Zhang Yi. "Now there are only 2 of us. Can you tell me how you actually solved those zombies in your territory?" Zhang Yi opened his mouth and was about to exaggerate his previous statement, but Bian Junwu stared at him and continued slowly. "The method you said before was reserved, and it was okay to deceive them, but don't play tricks with me. In fact, the Jiangnan district has more information than you think." Zhang Yi paused briefly and smiled. Sure enough, people from above are not easy to deceive, he thought. If he is vague again, it may leave a bad impression on Bian Junwu, and that's not something he wanted. Zhang Yi's expression suddenly became serious. He could no longer conceal his actions, so he eventually told Bian Junwu how he dealt with the zombies. Zhang Yi admitted that he was wary before, and believes Bian Junwu would naturally understand why. But as of now, he can reveal the truth to him. "Actually, the way I dealt with those zombies was flood them in their lair. But I dare not say that the zombies in the entire Xishan and Lujiang district have been dealt with. But within a radius of 50 kilometers, there have been no large-scale actions by zombies or giant rats." After listening to Zhang Yi's explanation, Bian Junwu picked up the glass of water at hand and took a sip. "Why didn't you tell the truth back at the meeting? Do you want the other forces to die more because they have attacked you together before? Or do you want to become the sole ruler of Tianhai City?" Facing Bian Junwu's inquiry, Zhang Yi was neither humble nor arrogant, so he explained slowly. "Maybe at the beginning, there may be some thoughts about getting even, or a possible revenge. After all, you can clearly see without any words from me that the relationship between our 5 forces is definitely not harmonious. Everyone is ready to encroach on each other's territory at any time, and try to weaken the other. And every time they do that and become weaker, I become stronger by extension. However, the most important reason was not that. The truth is that I can't really help them." Zhang Yi put down the glass of hot water in his hand and continued. "You should know how big the subway network in Tianhai City is. I don't have the ability to help all of their forces. And I don't think this method can solve the fundamental problem anyway. If the zombie king cannot be eliminated, zombies will keep appearing. Bien Junwoo did not immediately comment upon hearing Zhang Yi's explanation, but ponder for a brief moment, then simply ask, "Have you seen the zombie king?" Zhang Yi shook his head. "No, but I believe that the zombie king must exist." Zhang Yi showed a meaningful smile at the corner of his mouth. He stared at Bien Junwoo and said with an absolute conviction, "The zombies choose their targets and relentlessly pursue them until they're victorious. So there must be someone who is deliberately targeting our 5 forces." Hearing this, Bien Junwoo looked at Zhang Yi and then smiled. "You are really smart." Zhang Yi shook his head. "It's not a great wisdom, but just a little cleverness, which can barely save your life in this apocalyptic world." Bien Junwoo already had some opinions in his mind, and although Zhang Yi's method indeed could not fundamentally solve the problem, it could, however, maintain the stability in some areas in the city. It's just that it needs to be used with restraint. Otherwise, if all the zombies are forced out, the situation in Tianhai City will completely explode. Without sufficient preparation, it will be too much to cope with. Also, they still need to collect more intelligence. Only by understanding what the so-called Corpse King is and where it hides, can they carry out the execution operation. You have great potential. I guess you may be a Delta-level mutant. Do you want to consider leaving this small place and go to the Jiangnan region to try your luck? Bien Junwoo just casually asked this with his arms crossed. Zhang Yi was very interested in the concept of ability level proposed by Bien Junwoo but had no idea what he was referring to. "Wait a minute, what do you mean by Delta?" Hearing this, Bien Junwoo realized that Zhang Yi did not know these professional knowledge about mutants. So as he shook his head upon realization, he laughed slightly. "This is not a secret. I can tell you about it." He asked Zhang Yi, "When do you think mutants, such as ourselves, began to appear?" Zhang Yi answered almost without hesitation. "After the gamma rays passed over the blue planet and the Ice Age came." "Wrong." Bien Junwoo directly rejected Zhang Yi's answer and proceeds to explain, "Human mutation has existed since ancient times. From the perspective of evolution, all organisms have been mutating all the time. This is inevitable. Some mutations allow biological individuals to gain stronger survivability, and then have a greater chance of mating, and then leaving offspring to inherit this mutation. Just talking about us humans, today's humans are completely different from our ancestors millions of years ago. In the process of evolution, among hundreds of millions of people, there will always be some individuals with special abilities. Mighty generals and heroes with infinite strength, talented and strange people who can swallow clouds and spit out mist, and deformed monsters with 3 heads and 6 arms. They are all considered mutants." Bien Junwoo took a sip of his hot water and continued, staring at Zhang Yi with a serious expression. "Mutants have existed since ancient times, but it's just that there has never been such a large-scale mutation as today. What you see now is directly due to the influence of external factors, and the genetic sequence of the entire group of people has been changed, resulting in the birth of a large number of mutants. But countries around the world have been conducting research on human mutations since ages ago, a very, very long time ago. Therefore, the hierarchy and classifications of mutants have also existed for a long time." Hearing this, Zhang Yi crossed his arms and said he does indeed know and understands the 6 categories of mutants. But how are the levels of mutants divided? Bien Junwoo explained, "Currently, there is a unified classification standard for mutants around the world. Initially, it was the alpha level, also called level 1. The mutation ability of mutants at this level is not strong, and there is no growth potential. They can only show a part of extraordinary power. This kind of mutation is just stronger than ordinary people. Then there is beta level, also known as level 2. It is obviously more powerful than the alpha level, and has the strength of the most elite warriors of mankind, but still does not have much room for growth. Next is the gamma. The gamma level, level 3. At this level, the mutants already have relatively powerful extraordinary powers. These people either have a super powerful ability that can withstand hundreds of people, or some extremely powerful auxiliary ability." When Bien Junwoo said this, Zhang Yi immediately thought of the people around him. Uncle Yu and Chunlei were probably gamma-level mutants. This observation is based on their abilities, because one person can be equivalent to hundreds of warriors. What else? Is there anything else? Zhang Yi asked curiously. Bien Junwoo continued after a brief pause. Then, it becomes truly extraordinary, the realm of the real extraordinary, the Delta level. A level 4. The most obvious sign of this level is that it can absorb the energy of other mutants to evolve itself. Zhang Yi was shocked. A question that had puzzled him for a long time had finally been explained. No wonder he, Flower and Liang Yu could absorb other people's superpowers. But Uncle Yu and Chunlei couldn't. Bien Junwoo then proceed to say that a Delta-level mutant may not be able to show power stronger than the previous levels, but he can continue to evolve and will only stop when he reaches a certain peak. Therefore, at that point, it can be understood that he has an extremely high potential. At present, according to preliminary judgment, Yu and the leaders of various forces are at this level. Zhang Yi secretly repeated the word Delta in his mind. The superpower level given to him by Bien Junwoo belongs to a level 4 among the mutants, which is already a very high evaluation. Then, there is Epsilon, the highest level mutation, which is at level 5. When Bien Junwoo said this, his tone became serious. This is the strongest combat power in the world at present, a national treasure among national treasures. In addition to being able to devour the superpowers of other mutants, they also have extremely terrifying supernatural strength. So every mutant of this level is a national treasure. Zhang Yi stared at Bien Junwoo and couldn't help asking, "Are you a mutant of Epsilon level? You must be, right?" Thinking about how Bien Junwoo killed thousands of zombies in one strike, Zhang Yi, still shocked with this prospect, wondered. Hearing this, Bien Junwoo smiled faintly, but shook his head slowly. "No, I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm only at the Delta level, same as you." Zhang Yi couldn't help but be shocked to his core when he heard this. It was as if he'd seen a ghost. He then took a deep breath and said in a shocked tone, "If you are only at the Delta level, then it's hard for me to imagine how strong a mutant of Epsilon level is." However, after listening to Zhang Yi's words, Bien Junwoo suddenly laughed. "Oh, what's wrong? Is it that my understanding is wrong?" Zhang Yi asked. Bien Junwoo shook his head. "It is indeed a little different from your understanding. Some discrepancy with what you understood seems to be pretty obvious. In fact, the so-called superpower level classification has no absolute relationship with combat effectiveness. It represents more of an upper limit of ability. There are many types of superpowers, not only combat-attributed superpowers, but also auxiliary or other special categories. If the ability is restrained or the environment is not conducive to the use of the ability, it is not surprising that high-level mutants are counterkilled by lower-level mutants." Hearing this, Zhang Yi nodded, agreeing with his analysis. If a superpower is a weapon, whether it can exert its full power depends on the user of the weapon. Zhang Yi then pointed to his face. "So, your judgment of me is a Delta-level mutant that is level 4, right?" Zhang Yi suddenly laughed. "In other words, I am a mutant of the same level as you. You really think too highly of me." Zhang Yi took a moment to think over what he'd heard so far. There was no need for Bien Junwoo to deliberately conceal information. So, there are only two possibilities for him to define himself as a mutant of the same level as Zhang Yi. First, although his ability is extremely powerful, it also has huge flaws. Otherwise, with that kind of potential lethality, it is definitely not comparable to Zhang Yi's current ability. Of course, if it comes to defense, that is another matter. Second, Bien Junwoo saw the potential of Zhang Yi's spatial ability. And although the spatial ability was not an absolute combat attribute ability, its comprehensive ability was very abnormal. Not only is it an integrated attack and defense, but it also has a convenient auxiliary effect. From this point of view, it is more reasonable to be rated as Delta level. Bien Junwoo replied Zhang Yi at that moment. "This is just a judgment based on my understanding of you. In fact, the level assessment of mutants needs to be divided by professionals in the region. This rating may not be absolutely accurate. It can only be evaluated based on the ability displayed by the mutant. I just gave my empirical judgment based on your current performance. I think you are Delta level. Also, it is very likely that a mutant will complete a level transition of his ability. A possible jump in superpower level in the future, in other words. However, Delta is a critical point. If there is no co-devouring ability, then it can be determined that it is a mutant below level 3. After listening to Bien Junwoo's introduction, Zhang Yi had had a basic concept of the level classifications of mutants' abilities. At least according to Bien Junwoo's judgment, his ability potential is at the Delta level. That is, the potential of level 4. And although this does not mean absolute combat effectiveness, it also means unlimited potential. Zhang Yi was quite satisfied with his ability. But then, he became very interested in the mysterious level 5 Epsilon level mutant. How strong is a mutant of that level? Has such a person appeared in this world? Zhang Yi had some doubts, so he took this opportunity to ask, "Mr. Bien, have you ever seen an Epsilon level mutant?" Hearing the question, Bien Junwoo shook his head slowly. "I haven't seen one." At that moment, Zhang Yi reached for his glass of hot water and said with evident disheartened demeanor, "That's a pity." But then, Bien Junwoo immediately spoke up. "But I know that there is indeed an Epsilon level mutant in Shangjing district. Hearing this, a light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. Is there really such a person? As a mutant, Zhang Yi couldn't help but be curious about this existence. Seeing Zhang Yi's expression, Bian Junwu smiled and said, "This isn't much of a secret. After all, each major region needs to manage the surrounding large areas after the end of the world. In order to deal with various mutant creatures and groups that take advantage of the end of the world to cause chaos, we must rely on absolute power to suppress them." When mentioning Epsilon, Bian Junwu's eyes were also filled with admiration and envy. That person's ability is so powerful that it cannot be explained by common sense. It is said that anyone he targets, even if the person is thousands of miles away, the person will be killed by a thought. That is truly a miracle. Zhang Yi almost dropped the glass of hot water in his hand. He widened his eyes and looked at Bian Junwu in disbelief. Are you kidding me? He can kill people from thousands of miles away? Is his ability a satellite-guided missile? Bian Junwu raised the corner of his mouth and looked at Zhang Yi with his arms folded. It's much more convenient than that. I only know that anyone he targets will definitely die, and it doesn't matter where they run off to, whether the person escapes to the end of the world or possibly another realm.